If you were looking at the 2025 roster, right, what are we are projected to go into the season with this year for the Texas football team compared to what we just had in 2024, how would you compare each position, right? Would you look at it as 2025 is more favorable or 2024 was? We discuss on today and possibly tomorrow's episode of Locked on Longhorns.
You are Locked on Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked on Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So, yeah, on today's episode, and like I said, probably tomorrow's too, I can get the yapping. And it's a lot to talk about when you're talking about each position group. So, presumably a two-part episode comparing the 2025 roster to the 2024 roster, right? At each position. How are we looking going into next year compared to what we just had, right? So that's going to be today and once again, presumably tomorrow's episode of Locked on Longhorns. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked on Longhorns and tomorrow's part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. A couple housekeeping notes. If you're watching on YouTube, I understand the background's a little different. Lighting's a little bit off. My schedule changed dramatically at work. And so this is just me adjusting to it. I'm having to record this at like 7 a.m., which is a lot earlier than I usually do it. And I'm not able to record in the room I usually record right now just because of that dramatic change in schedules from Monday to Tuesday. But I'll have it figured out. I'll be back in my usual location. Everything will be back to normal. This is just a one-time thing. Every episode after this will be back to normal where I normally am. And I know I look tired. I am. Right? If I look like anything else, I'm not. I promise. I'm just tired. I'm just tired. All right. So, I got to thinking. I got to looking at all of these Longhorns balling out. Right? All of these Longhorns showing out at the combine. And I remember when we sent 11 players to the combine and 11 players to the draft, and everybody was like, oh, there's no way, that Texas can, bounce back from that. And even though we told them, programs like Georgia and Ohio State and all of that have, they were like, but it's Texas. Okay. Well, we bounced back from that. Right. And now you have 14 players going to the combine, 14 players that potentially could get drafted, and even more that are leaving this football team. Like I said, it's probably 20 impact players that you're losing from this 2024 roster. And we're expected to once again be at or near the top of the mountain in college football, right? I think that's a testament to what Sark has built at the 40 acres, that you could lose 15 to 20 impact players and still be considered one of the favorites to win the national championship, right? This is what we were hoping for a long time. And that's what Steve Sarkisian has built. So I want to look at each position on the roster projected right now. Of course, we could go out and, make a splash in the portal. But it feels like the roster and the depth chart is pretty set going into 2025. And so, were we better at certain positions in 2024 than we project to be in 2025? Where are we better in 2025 maybe than we were in 2024, right? So that's what we're going to discuss once again over the next 2 days on Locked on Longhorns. So, of course, as always, we're going to start with the quarterback position, right? Quarterback position being most important position on the field, and definitely a very interesting conversation to start off, right? Because you're looking at Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning. And the fact that this is even a debate, when you're talking about Quinn Ewers being one of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen at the University of Texas, is a hell of a luxury, but that's what happens when you go from 5-star to 5-star, especially at the quarterback position. We're not going from Quinn Ewers to John Smith, right? Which a lot of people think that Arch Manning is, right? A lot of people wanted to say that, if he was John Smith, he'd be a 3-star. Well, he's Arch Manning. So, like I said, the fact that, Quinn Ewers as a 3-year starter what he was able to accomplish at the University of Texas, the fact that you can even debate if they are in a better position, if Texas is in a better position going to his backup, just shows, how great of a position Texas is in, right? And how much of a luxury it is to have the talent that we have in the quarterback room. And I think that Texas will be in a better position at quarterback in 2025 with Arch Manning than they were in 2024 with Quinn Ewers. Now, I think that, when you look at it, the edge that Quinn Ewers probably had over Arch Manning or has going over Arch Manning into the season is that Quinn Ewers had over 30 plus starts to his name, right? Arch Manning has 2. And so you would just have to believe that there's some level of, I would say that you would have to believe that that big of a gap in experience has to lend itself somewhere, right? Even if Arch Manning is more talented, even if Arch Manning can attack a defense in more ways than Quinn Ewers, you would have to believe a quarterback that has started 30 plus games compared to a quarterback that started 2, there has to be an advantage in there somewhere. Would I be able to articulate where that advantage is? Not necessarily. But obviously, Quinn Ewers has seen a lot more than Arch Manning has, right? And there's going to be a lot of Arch Manning, even though he's played a lot of quarterback in his life. He hasn't played a lot of quarterback in college. I think enough to, give us a good enough sample size that, yeah, he's a really good player, but he doesn't have an extensive, you know, resume yet in college in terms of being on the field and playing. And so there's still going to be some learning on the fly this year, right? There's still going to be some growing pains. There's still going to be some getting adjusted where you felt like Quinn Ewers going into year 3 had already gone through that phase. So that's where I would give Quinn Ewers the advantage, just in terms of the experience. But when I look at Arch Manning, I think that there's things that he does well that we saw Quinn Ewers was not able to do well. And I think that what Quinn Ewers did do well, Arch Manning won't have a problem doing well, if that makes sense. So starting with the obvious, right? Quinn Ewers was not a mobile quarterback. Quinn Ewers could not necessarily extend plays or make something out of nothing, right? His job was to be on time, be on rhythm, and be in the pocket. Very rarely did the play break down and Quinn Ewers was able to turn nothing into something. It was either there or it wasn't. Right. Arch Manning has that ability. Nobody's open. I can take off and hit the defense over the head. The pass rush got here a little faster than expected. I can maneuver, get out of the pocket, roll left, roll right, make a throw, or I can take off and hit the defense over the head. We can add another dimension to the run game with Arch Manning on design runs, as we saw with that 60-yard run. It was either against ULM. I think it was against ULM. Right. And so it just adds another dimension to the offense. One, in terms of being able to design it, scrambling, and making something out of nothing. Then the deep ball. We expected when Quinn Ewers came into the University of Texas that the deep ball would be a huge part of our offense the last 3 years, but it wasn't. But it was, however, when Arch Manning came in the game, right? For those 2.5 games that he played, his average depth of target was, I believe, over 10 yards. He was spraying the ball all over the field and doing it accurately. When he was throwing the ball down the field, he was dropping it in the bucket. That's not something we necessarily saw from Quinn Ewers, right? It felt a lot of times like he was trying to place the ball more than just throwing it. Arch Manning is throwing the ball downfield and also doing a hell of a good job with the placement. So I think that the deep ball, we're going to see a lot of that this year, and we're going to be a lot more proficient at it with Arch Manning. Now, Quinn Ewers was surgical in the short to intermediate area, right? Very nice touch on his throws, very accurate ball, right? Very good ball placement. I would believe that Arch Manning can do a really good job in the short to intermediate part of the field. Where Quinn may have the advantages knowing when to take the check down, I did think that he took the check down a little bit too much, right? Where Arch may ignore some of those shorter routes may ignore some of that lower profit, trying to hit the home run ball. But once again, that's just a young quarterback that's going to have to adjust to taking what the defense gives them sometimes. But I would believe, based on everything we've heard and seen from Arch Manning, that he would be able to master the short to intermediate area of the field as well as he throws the deep ball. So, like I said, there are things that are a huge part of this offense that Arch Manning does at a high level that Quinn Ewers did not. And I'm also looking at everything that Quinn Ewers did do at a high level. And I'm saying Arch Manning should be able to do that. So I think that at the quarterback position, we will be in better shape in 2025 compared to where we were in 2024. And like I said, when you're coming off of having a 3-year starter in Quinn Ewers and you can say you're better off, it's a hell of a luxury. And that is the environment that Steve Sarkisian has created at the 40 acres. A quick word from our sponsors, and then we get into potentially the rest of the offense, starting with running back, right? Interesting. Are we better off in 2025 than we were in 2024? We discuss after the break. All right, today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by Supply House. All right, get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. You need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. So join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code S-H-5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. All right. So, next I'm going to talk about running back. And Cedric Baxter is coming back, right? Running back is interesting because your starter, per se, in 2024 is now your backup in 2025. So that's interesting. How often does that happen in college football, right? Where your starter, well, I guess it probably happens a lot. It probably happens a lot. Yeah. Okay. So let's look at it, right? Obviously, 2024 looked the way it did because of injury. So you take that into account. But essentially, your run game was Trey Wisner as your starter, Jaden Blue as your backup, kind of change of pace back, and then Jarrett Gibson. Goal line carries, kind of just third running back on the depth chart. We're whooping somebody's ass, put him in, that was more Jarrett Gibson's role. Now it's going to be Cedric Baxter, Trey Wisner, and Jarrett Gibson, right? As your 1-2-3 punch. And so if I had to say where we were better off, right, in 2024 or 2025, I'm going to say 2025. Now, all of this heavily depends on how healthy Cedric Baxter is, right? Because if Cedric Baxter is not at 100%, then you're comparing an injured, less than 100% version of Cedric Baxter to what Trey Wisner gave you last year. Now, was Trey Wisner a Doak Walker Award candidate, nominee? No, I said candidate and nominee. So you can tell it's early. But no, right? Was he a world beater? Was he Bijan Robinson or Jonathan Brooks? No. But he was a very serviceable running back that had some very, very good games for the Texas Longhorns. And so for us to be in a better position in 2025, Cedric Baxter would need to be healthy and come out and play like one of the best running backs in the country. The reason I'm going with 2025 is because when you still have Trey Wisner, right, as somebody that can come in and do what he did last year in a more limited role, right, which he'll be fresher. But Cedric Baxter has, I think, a higher floor and ceiling than both Trey Wisner and Jaden Blue. You know, Jaden Blue, as explosive as he is, as fast as he is, I mean, really found himself out of the rotation a lot of times. I mean, there were games where they gave the ball to Trey Wisner 30 times when Jaden Blue had 3, 4 touches, right? And it was his inability to hold on to the ball and maybe some other things. I think Cedric Baxter is that type of running back that can go out and, I don't want to say single handedly, because there obviously is an offensive line in front of him and we're going to have a hell of a passing game. But Cedric Baxter is that type of running back that can go out and lead this team to victory. You give him the ball 25 to 30 times, 20 to 25 times, whatever, whether it's in the run game or the passing game, and he can absolutely dominate teams, right? I'm not sure how often Jaden Blue or Trey Wisner dominated teams. A lot of times it was, oh, we're killing them by volume. We're committed to the run game. We're running it 30 to 40 times, and we're just leaning on them, right? Cedric Baxter can do both. He is the running back that you can give 20 to 25 times. He can be the workhorse and just lean on a defense until they don't want to tackle him anymore. But he's also that running back that you can give it to him anywhere on the field and he can make the big play happen, right? One of the best running backs in college football, obviously the number one running back in his class. I just think Cedric Baxter brings more to this offense than Trey Wisner and Jaden Blue did last year. But then you still have Trey Wisner and Jared Gibson to spell Cedric Baxter. So I think if Cedric Baxter is anywhere close to 100%, this run game will look a lot better than it did last year. Because as good as Trey Wisner is, you know, we've heard it a lot. We've said it a lot. He wouldn't be starting on a healthy Texas team in a healthy Texas rotation, right? He's more of a backup, change of pace guy. And Jaden Blue, as good as he was, like I said, fumbling issues, found himself out of the rotation, right? As explosive as he was, I should say, right? And he wasn't somebody that you could lean on, you know, and give 15 to 20 touches a game. And so with Cedric Baxter coming back, now you don't really have a Jaden Blue guy in the running back rotation. That's a little concerning. You know, you don't have that one just speed, very explosive guy. But like I said, Cedric Baxter, when you look at the lineage of Texas running backs, the running backs that have dominated at the University of Texas and gone on to have very nice NFL careers, Cedric Baxter is more of that mold. So if he's anywhere close to 100%, I think this running game will look a lot better than it did last year. Tight end. I'm going to go to tight end first because we're coming up on a break. Tight end is interesting, right? Gunnar Helm was at the University of Texas for a long time, very experienced, very savvy. Um, just kind of the epitome of what you think a tight end should be, right? Like, obviously, the receiving element, a very good receiver, but just gritty and tough. You know, I told the story yesterday about, you know, how he did all of his drills, ran a 4.84, all of that with a sprained ankle. You know, that's just what you want from a tight end. You know, somebody who can just go out and just display toughness, right? Whether it's blocking or being able to catch passes and make plays down the field. And so Gunnar Helm did that. And you don't really have a ton of experience at the tight end position now, right? You know, we've heard about Jordan Washington. A lot of people are intrigued about Jordan Washington, but what does he actually bring to the table? I think we're going to see now. But when you talk about potential, I mean, there's people that have said he has the potential to be better than Jatavian Sanders, just in terms of his athleticism and what he can bring to this team at the tight end position, right? A lot of wide receiver traits in Jordan Washington. What he is as a blocker, I'm not sure, but he's going to have to be a good blocker to play in Steve Sarkisian's offense. He's at least going to have to be an adequate blocker to play in Steve Sarkisian's offense. How long will it take him to develop, right? I believe, you know, going from high school to college, tight end is one of the toughest positions to do that. So Jordan Washington is going to be at the University of Texas for a couple more years. I'm going to say right now, we were in a better position in 2024 with Gunnar Helm just because of his experience and his ability as a receiver and a blocker. But it probably won't take long before I'm eating my words. And I love Jordan Washington as a prospect. I love him. It doesn't even feel right for me to say Gunnar Helm over Jordan Washington, but I just think it's going to take him a little bit of time to get adjusted to being a blocker and to being the talented receiver that we know he can be. But he's going to start making plays. We'll see it early on, but eventually when he settles in, he's going to make some plays that we didn't see from Gunnar Helm. I mean, he's going to make some spectacular plays, especially with Arch Bennett throwing the ball. And I think eventually he'll look better at the tight end position than Gunnar Helm did, but I think it's going to take a little bit. So I'm going with Gunnar Helm right now. But like I said, I think Jordan Washington is coming, and he's coming for sure. And he's going to be that guy at the tight end position. Then you got Amari Winston behind him and some other guys as well, Spencer Shannon. So, we'll see how, Sark utilizes the tight ends this year. He talks about it's the second most important position in his offense. We'll see. I'm going with Gunnar Helm right now, but I think eventually Jordan Washington will have a little bit of, more high-end production than we saw from Gunnar Helm this last year at the University of Texas. Quick word from the sponsors, and then we get into the wide receiver group. Are they going to be better in 2025 than they were in 2024? All right, so looking at receiver is interesting as well because you do return Ryan Wingo and DeAndre Moore, who were huge parts of your receiving core, right? You bring in, some 5 stars, mainly Khalil Lockett and Jamie French, right? And so you would expect that they can come in and make some type of impact, just like Ryan Wingo did. And then, we've heard of players like Parker Livingstone and Aaron Butler, ready to step up. But you just lost Isaiah Bond. Didn't have the year you expected, but still a really, really, really good player, first round talent. It's probably going to go in, the second, third round at worst in the NFL draft. And then you had Matthew Golden, right, who was going to be a first round pick. So you just lost 2 really, really, really good wide receivers, who definitely Matthew Golden and Isaiah Bond, at one point were the focal points of your passing offense. And so it comes down to how big of a step Ryan Wingo is going to take, because I think he's more physically gifted than Matthew Golden and Isaiah Bond. When you look at him, 6'2", 215, and I think he can run a hell of a 42, right? I'm not sure if he can run a 4.29 like Matthew Golden did, but he certainly can put himself in 4.3 territory. So he has all the makings of a number 1 wide receiver. How much of that will we see this year? I think it'll be huge in determining the success of this receiver core as a whole. DeAndre Moore, very savvy slot receiver, right? You just want to see a little bit more consistency from him, but I think you will this year. Now he's going to be a bigger part of the rotation now that Isaiah Bond and Matthew Golden have gone on, right? And so I think you'll see a step from DeAndre Moore as well. Then it just comes down to, okay, are we 3 receivers, 4 receivers, and who are those 3 or 4 receivers going to be, right? Like I said, is it going to be Aaron Butler and Parker Livingstone, who we've heard a lot about just in terms of raw talent? Is it going to be one of the 5-star receivers you brought in? Are they going to come in and just be so good that you have to put them on the field early? I'm not sure, right? But I'm going to project that 2025 will be a little bit better. One, because the quarterback throwing it to him will be better, right? So obviously the receiving production will increase based on the level of the quarterback. And 2, just because Isaiah Bond, when you lost Jonte Cook and Isaiah Bond was so banged up throughout the year, it really felt a lot of times like our wide receiver core was, Matthew Golden or bust, right? Then it was Gunnar Helm and Trey Wisner. But a lot of times it felt like Matthew Golden or bust, especially down the stretch. Ryan Wingo would make a play here. DeAndre Moore would make a play here. But it felt like Matthew Golden or bust. This year, it feels like you're going to have a lot of guys you can go to that are going to play at a high level. And it feels like Arch Manning is really going to spread the ball around, right? And like I said, if Ryan Wingo and DeAndre Moore both take steps like they should, I would expect this wide receiver core in 2025 will look better than it did in 2024. Then offensive line, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to do the defense on the next episode. Offensive line, I have to go with the 2024 unit. right? And I still think that will be very solid in 2025. But 2024, I got to go with, I got to go with that unit for sure. Obviously, Kelvin Banks, one of the greatest players to ever step on the turf at the University of Texas. Trevor Gooseby, I think he'll fill in really well for Kelvin Banks, but Kelvin Banks is on a different level. Going to be the first Longhorn taken off the board this year. Obviously, advantage 2024 goes to left tackle. Left guard, Hayden Connor. I think that's going to be an interesting one. Very experienced, very good pass blocking guard. I believe Umyazulu is going to be your starter at that position. Very intrigued by him. We've heard a lot about him. That position could be a wash, right? But, we haven't seen him. We've seen a lot of Hayden Connor. So I would go Hayden Connor right there at left guard. Center, Jake Majors, over 60 plus starts. I mean, probably one of the more underrated players in Texas program history. Got to go with Jake Majors at center. Obviously, you're bringing DJ Campbell back at right guard. So, that's a wash there. He should be better than he was last year. And then Cam Williams, shout out to him. I did not know he got down to 317 for the combine. Big boy been working hard. I like Brandon Baker a lot. Cam Williams started for 1 year. He was really good at times. He was also really, really poor at times, right? I think Brandon Baker will be more consistent. So I do like, Brandon Baker at right tackle a little bit more than Cam Williams. But ultimately, I think the 2024 offensive line, at least right now, projects, you know, better than what is projected for the offensive line of 2025. So that's my offensive thoughts. I'm actually surprised because I didn't really pick them until I got, live on camera on the show. Like I didn't really think about it beforehand. This is kind of just more so all off the top of the dome. And I didn't expect to pick 2025 as much as I did. So I'm actually excited now. I'm like a little bit more excited going into the season than I was because I'm like, yeah, like we might be better at a lot of these groups, right? And I think it all comes down to Arch Manning, right? He's kind of the conductor. And if you feel like the conductor is better, then everything around it, will improve and benefit from that. So defense tomorrow, part 2, right? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hook 'em. Peace.